Right, now this picture's got a lot of problems. The green is way too bright, as is this red. Also this blue could do with coming up a little bit, and there's too much green on the face of this little boy. This needs some work. Well, let's try this using curves. So I'm going to come here to my luminance curve. I'm also going to come down to this where it says RGB curves. That's going to give me a red, green and a blue curve. It's not that easy to see against the picture, but it's there, trust me. Okay, now the first thing is, why did I put a luminance curve on there as opposed to an RGB curve? Well, I'll show you. I'll call up an RGB curve, and I'll, just by means of example, I'm putting in more contrast there. You can see the colours have suddenly got stronger. In fact, they're completely over the top. But if I get rid of that, and I come to my luminance curve, if I start adjusting the lights and the darks, a luminance curve doesn't increase the intensity of the colours. That makes it very useful and very nice to use in conjunction with the RGB curves so that I can separate out the overall dark and light from the colour balances. I'm going to drag off to the side, get rid of these points, and I'm going to come to my RGB curves. That's where I want to do most of my work. Now my biggest problem is with green. It's really taking over the whole picture. It's way too bright, so let's control green curve, put a point there and start to drag down the values, especially in the lighter areas. Okay, that's taming the green there, but because I'm taming the green, I'm starting to get a purple tint to this blue jacket, and this red is still looking really quite bright. So let's come to our red. Let's put a control point and start dropping down the lightest values of red there. And let's try maybe pulling down the middle as well a little bit. I'm looking at the jacket, but also mainly I'm looking at the face. Remember, the face is always the most important thing of any picture, especially around the eye area. Now maybe I can do with dropping down that green just a little bit at some of the light points. So I come to my green curve, pull them down a little bit more. Yeah, I'm getting a more natural skin tone there. Now what about the blues? I want to put a midpoint there as a control point because I don't really want to affect the upper part of the blues. I'm going to put a point in the darker part of the blues component and up this up a little bit. And yes, I'm getting more of a blue tone there, but without affecting some of the upper parts because I've got my control point. Now, it's not that easy to see this. I had a big problem with green, so that's got the most changes there. I also made subtle changes to the blue and the red curves, but that's the key, subtle. If you're yanking these curves into all different kind of weird and wonderful shapes, maybe you're doing something wrong. These tend to favour nudging around rather than yanking around, okay? So I don't want any yankers attacking this. Let's take a look at this without the effect. Oh, it's only when you see the original that you see that's really horrible, that's awful. But now when you see it's much kinder. If I want to make any changes to the overall darkness and lightness, like maybe I want to make this shadow area here a little bit lighter, I'll put a control point and up some of the darker areas. Yeah, I'm getting just a little bit more detail out of the shadow areas. I'm watching the face when I do that. I could do with moving this control point down a little bit so the midtones are less affected by this. Let's try that about there. And without, with, just, well, I've got my luminance curve. Watch what happens when I try and up some of the highlights. Watch the hair. It just gets more and more blown out, so there's no detail left in there. So I'll drag this off the side, get rid of it. With curves, you can control the contrast, the saturation, the overall colour balance in the darker areas and the lighter areas. They're a little bit more complicated, but they are hugely powerful. Most professional designers, if they're using Photoshop, will do a lot of their colour balance and a lot of their colour work using curves. You've got the same tools at your disposal. I recommend you take the time, play around with them, see if you can get some use out of them. If you can use them, if you learn how to use them, you're going to become so much more adept at making sure your photographs look good. I hope you got something out of this video. If you did, maybe you consider clicking on one of the links below and check out my game called Disco Baby, which is on the iTunes Store or Android stores like Google Play. It has 3 different games in it, a memory game, a maths game for children, and a dance along with me game for toddlers to join in with. Thanks for your time.